Good evening. I'm Robert Daum, a member of Simon Fraser University's Center for Dialogue Steering Committee and director of Vancouver School of Theology's Iona Pacific Interreligious Center. And I'm pleased to be your moderator for the evening. There's a very exciting evening planned, including what I know will be a wonderful lecture from Karen Armstrong and two very exciting announcements. This is our agenda for tonight. First, the public launch of the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network by its chair, Alastair Smith. Then, Karen's lecture, which will be webcast live globally to hundreds of thousands of viewers, with the assistance of the TED Prize and the Charter for Compassion. Then, a major update on the state of the Charter for Compassion from Karen. There will be an opportunity for questions that have been emailed, Twittered, Facebooked in advance. And there will be an opportunity for book signing. The Center for Dialogue's activities are broad and diverse, including teaching SFU's signature undergraduate semester in dialogue program, encouraging experiential learning and community engagement across the university, hosting a vibrant program of research and community engagement through our selected fellows and associates, and facilitating public dialogues and workshops on important civic issues. Karen Armstrong is in Vancouver for a 12-day visit, and on Tuesday, she received one of SFU's most prestigious awards, the Jack P. Blaney Award for Dialogue, presented every few years to an individual who has demonstrated excellence in using dialogue to further the understanding of complex issues that are important to the public. Previous award winners include international environmentalist Maurice Strong, Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and Liz Lerman, choreographer and founder of Liz Lerman Dance Exchange. We're calling her visit 12 Days of Compassion, and have organized a wide range of events designed to focus the Vancouver region's attention on diverse aspects of living a compassionate life. Events range from this lecture to meetings with mayors and councillors, an intergenerational dialogue, and an all-day academic symposium, a program for university students on compassion and religion, and a lunch with Vancouver's business community, among many other events. Karen's visit stimulated the formation of 61 book clubs, reading 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. More than 2,000 local participants attending events during these 12 days, and a lasting curricular impact for Vancouver schools, with specific curriculum developed around compassion and the Charter. Before introducing Alastair Smith, who has an exciting announcement, I'd like to acknowledge our partners in this endeavor, including the TED Prize, the Charter for Compassion, the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education, Iona Pacific Interreligious Center at Vancouver School of Theology, the SFU Faculty of Education, Free the Children, the Ismaili Center, the Ricks Center for Corporate Citizenship and Engaged Leadership, the Vancouver Board of Trade, and the Vancouver School Board. There is one other partner, the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, that is co-sponsoring tonight's event with the TED Prize and the Charter for Compassion. The GVCN is a group of respected organizations and individuals working to enhance and build compassion in our Metro Vancouver communities. The GVCN has partnered in several events featuring Karen Armstrong during her Vancouver visit and is a formal partner with the Charter for Compassion. To tell you more about the network and why tonight is an important milestone in its evolution, please welcome Alastair Smith. Alastair is the chair of the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network. In his professional life, he is the deacon and business chaplain at Christ Church Cathedral and works nationally and internationally as a facilitator in the credit union system. He's also a friend. Alistair Smith.
Thank you, Robert. Honored guests, book club members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for that warm welcome. And a very special hello from Vancouver to the people joining us from around the world on the World Wide Web. It is good to be here, right now. The present moment is a wonderful moment. Frankly, I'm recalling my teenage years when my friends and I would go to rock concerts at the Montreal Forum. And there was always the local band no one had ever heard of warming up for the main event. I feel like one of those local bands no one has ever heard of. By the end of this evening, though, I do hope that you'll remember the group I represent, the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network. So let's think about compassion. And I first invite you to close your eyes as you feel comfortable and to start to become aware of your breathing. I invite you to breathe in and breathe out. Match the length of your exhales with the length of your inhales. And now listen. Do you hear that? Do you hear that magic? That magic of your breath. That is life. In the ancient Hebrew, it's ruach, the breath of life. And you and I and all people share it. We are linked to ourselves and to each other by this simple and profound act of breathing. In the words of a great teacher from my tradition, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we are all one. Black, brown, yellow, red, female, male, gay, and so-called straight. We are all one. And simply and wonderfully, we experience that oneness in our common and collective breath. At the Vancouver Compassion Network, we want all of us to experience compassion as easily and as deeply as we experience breathing. We want to celebrate compassion in its various forms all over the Lower Mainland. We want to help individuals and groups engage compassionately to make their lives, their work, and their communities healthy for all people. We want you to know that compassion is already out there, and it is already in here, right now. And compassion is vital for us as a species. In 10 years' time, we want Metro Vancouver to be world famous as a place of compassion. And to do that, we are focused on three main functions with our partners, the Charter for Compassion, the SFU Center for Dialogue, the Vancouver Foundation, Van City, Free the Children, and a host of other groups and individuals. First, we are creating an online environment where we can share our stories of compassion with each other, to teach and to learn with each other. Secondly, we're using real-world spaces like the SFU Center for Dialogue, where groups and individuals from all walks of life in the Lower Mainland can meet in order to have the sometimes challenging and difficult conversations about our experience as neighbors. For example, how might the victims, the perpetrators, and the witnesses of the Stanley Cup riots of 9 months ago use compassion, accountability, and responsibility to build our communities rather than cause more pain for the fleeting relief of revenge. And thirdly, we want to build a series of measures that we can use to keep track of our progress, increasing compassion collectively and individually over the next 10 years. And very importantly, we want to honor compassion in real life. Those amazing moments of individual compassion that we share with family, friends, and strangers. Because at the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, we believe that compassion is at its heart real life. A story. A friend of mine wrestles with depression, and I have her explicit permission to tell this story. One afternoon recently, she was in a therapy session, and the therapist with whom she works made a decision that for my friend's safety, she needed to be hospitalized. An ambulance was then called. As it pulled up to the doors of emergency at Vancouver General, the EMT sat there, sitting quietly next to my friend. After a little while, as my friend sat quite still, he turned to face her and said, "I have only known you for a few minutes, but you strike me as a very smart, creative, and caring person. And I'd like to ask a favor of you." Tentatively, my friend said, "Okay." "When we go into the hospital in a minute," he continued, "I'd like us to go in there together. And I'd like you to go in there with your head held high, because you have nothing to be ashamed of." And in they walked, side by side, heads held high. My friend still wrestles with depression, but for every one of the dark days, there is a shaft of light, a shaft of hope, because one person cared enough to speak up and to walk beside her compassionately. His compassion has helped her start a new story because he listened and cared for her as a fellow human being. And I want to stress how simple his act was. There was no need for great procedural gymnastics. There was no need to change a policy, to form a committee, to storm the barricades, or even to write a blog about the importance of compassion. He simply treated her with dignity and respect. In the midst of a process and culture that could and often does fundamentally shame people, he gave her the opportunity to appear in public without shame. He treated her, in the words of the Charter for Compassion, with absolute justice, equity, and respect. Karen Armstrong's visit here to Metro Vancouver is an important step for all of us who live here. She'll be meeting this week and next with thousands of people, from political leaders through young people, spiritual leaders, academics, business people, and individuals. And at the GVCN, after Karen has gone home, we want our learning and engaging with compassion to lead to action. We're looking to increase what His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls a generosity of the heart. His Holiness says, every day as you wake up, think, today I am fortunate to have woken up. I am alive. I have a precious human life. I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to use all my energies to develop myself, to expand my heart out to others for the benefit of all beings. Friends, imagine what our communities would be like if each and every one of us used our abundant breath and energy to expand our hearts for the benefit of all beings. In the words of a far better speaker than myself, at the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, we have a dream. We have a dream where each and every one of us finds the courage to be compassionate with ourselves, to know that we make mistakes, and to own up to those mistakes when we make them, to learn from them, and to move on. We have a dream where here in Metro Vancouver, sharp and humiliating words are banished from the political discourse. A dream where people of different spiritual traditions can gather safely to reflect, to contemplate, and to learn from each other. A dream where everybody in our varied and diverse communities live under an ethos of first do no harm. A dream where we individually and collectively have courage. We have a dream where we all hold on to what is good. We have a dream where we return no one evil for evil. We have a dream where we support each other, and a dream where we each honor the breath of life in all its wondrous variations. My colleagues and I invite you to go to www.gvcn.ca and to join us, to join our work to make Metro Vancouver world famous, not only as a beautiful place physically, but a compassionate place in its very heart and soul. Thank you.
Alistair, it's my pleasure and great privilege on behalf of the Charter for Compassion to present you with this beautiful plaque that is a gift from the Charter for Compassion. Generally, one receives plaques of this beauty and this something as significant as what is written on it at the end of the road, at the end of the journey. But the work that you and your colleagues have put into the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, even up to this point, certainly has captured the imagination and the attention of people in our own community, but also of the people who have been driving the work for the Charter for Compassion. And so this is presented to you in recognition of the great work that you've done thus far in advancing the process in which we are going to be engaged to make Vancouver a compassionate city in the fullest sense of the dream of the Charter for Compassion.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you. Thank you.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce Karen Armstrong, one of the world's most thought-provoking, prolific, and original public thinkers on the role of religion in historical and in contemporary life. She is an international authority on religious fundamentalism and monotheism, a leading voice in promoting the core elements of religious traditions that encourage mutual justice and respect. Her poignant writing and captivating talks have sparked worldwide debate and respectful dialogue. Through best-selling books such as 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, The Case for God, and a history of God, she examines the deep differences and profound similarities among a richly diverse array of religious cultures and belief systems. In 2008, she was awarded the TED Prize in recognition of her call, as well as in support of that effort, for a council of religious and spiritual leaders to draw up a charter for compassion. The resulting charter applies shared moral priorities to foster greater global understanding, and it has grown to a considerable international following. A network of compassionate cities is now emerging to endorse and to implement the charter practically and creatively. As a speaker and writer, she reminds us eloquently that all major religions embrace the core principle of what is understood in some as the Golden Rule, which requires individuals to treat others as they themselves wish to be treated. Tonight we celebrate her innovative contributions to tolerance, understanding, and compassion globally. Karen Armstrong.
Thank you, Vancouver. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Alistair. And thank you, Professor Mark Winston, who's been working on these 12 days for such a long time. It's wonderful to be with you here. Right, now the lecture. What is religion? Now, I bet you think you know the answer to that. We all know what religion is when we see it. But actually, it's not as simple as you might think. It's now generally admitted in religious studies that there is no answer to this question. Our view of religion in the West, in the modern West, which sees religion as a separate, autonomous activity that sealed off from such matters as politics and ordinary life, something that is an internal quest, an internal search for the transcendent, and that doesn't mingle much with secular matters. This is a modern concept developed in the West in the 17th century at the start of our modernity. It's the charter myth of the nation-state, the secular nation-state. But in other cultures, there is no equivalent to that concept of religion. And so I just open with that, and I hope I'll close with some thoughts that link back to that, to remind us that we don't always know what we're talking about when we speak and pontificate about religion. Because our thinking, despite our extraordinary technological and scientific genius, our thinking about religion is often rather childish, indeed sometimes primitive. Let me give you an example. When I was quite a small child, I had to learn the catechism definition in the Roman Catholic Catechism. What is God? A small question, and a short answer. One drew breath and replied, God is the Supreme Spirit who alone exists of himself and is infinite in all perfections. Now, I must say that at 8 years old, that didn't mean much to me, and I still find it a somewhat arid, boring definition. But I have since decided that it's also incorrect. Because after, over 20 years now of studying the world religions, I can imagine the great luminaries of the past, Maimonides in the Jewish tradition, Ibn Sina in the Islamic tradition, Thomas Aquinas in the Christian tradition, turning in their graves. All of them insisted that God is not the supreme spirit. God is not the supreme being. God is not a being at all. God is being itself. Esse se ipsum, said Thomas Aquinas. It's wrong, said Maimonides, even to think that God exists, because our notion of existence is far too limited to apply to God. When we're talking about God, we're talking about a different mode of reality. But what's really wrong with that definition is that it takes it for granted that it's possible simply to draw breath and define a word whose literal meaning is to set limits upon a reality that has to go beyond everything we can think and know. And in the pre-modern world, good theology was meant to tip you into a moment of transcendence and silence, where you realized that you'd gone beyond the reach of words and concepts. Because our minds are tuned to transcendence. It's a peculiar quality of the human mind that we have ideas and experiences that we can't easily put into words. And we seek out moments which give us, we seek out activities that give us such moments. The medievals had a word for that place in the brain, in the mind, where we tip over into transcendence. They called it intellectus, our intellect. And we have made our intellect something much more rational and down to earth. But way back in the 10th century, before the Common Era, the people of India, who were always in the van of religious progress, developed a form of religious discourse which would remain normative and would be repeated in different ways in all the great world traditions. It was called the Brahmogya competition. The object of this was to define the Brahman, to find a verbal formula to encapsulate the Brahman, is the ultimate reality in the Hindu tradition. Brahman is not a person, not a personal god. You can't speak to Brahman. And a way of translating Brahman is the all. So you can't possibly define Brahman because Brahman is everything that is. It is being itself. And it's no good really speaking to Brahman because Brahman is also in you. You are Brahman as well as everything else that we see around us. But nevertheless, this was the exercise these priests would set themselves. And the challenger would kick off by using all his great spirituality and intellect and learning with an enigmatic, riddling, paradoxical, poetic formulation of Brahman. And the others would listen intently, and drawing on their great erudition and their great spirituality, they too would try to respond to that and build upon it, answer it in some way. But the priest who won was the priest who reduced everybody to silence. And in that silence, the Brahman was present. The Brahman was not present in the wordy definitions and formulations. The Brahman was known in the stunning realization of the limitations of speech and the limitations of thought. Now, you might say, well, that's all right for the people of India, but we monotheists in the Western tradition believe in revelation. Words and scriptures have come down from on high, have been revealed, cast in stone, and there are things that we actually know about God that have been revealed by God. Well, no, it isn't that simple, because the idea of revelation had meant something rather different. revelation was not fixed once for all. In the Jewish tradition, the early rabbis created a form of interpretation of Scripture, which they called midrash. It comes from the word darash, to go in search of, to investigate something that is not immediately self-evident. And each time that a rabbi, duly prepared, exposed himself to the sacred text, it would mean something different. And his midrash was not complete until he'd found something in the text something new, different, something that would probably never have occurred to the biblical author, but which he could answer the specific needs of the community, because revelation was ongoing. It continued every time a Jew opened himself to that text, because God's word is infinite and could not be tied down to a single interpretation. I mean, in the Christian world, you have the Greek fathers of the church, such as St. Athanasius, saying, if we're speaking about revelation, it tells us that we know nothing about God. We can know nothing about God at all. That's why things have to be revealed. And a lot of the early doctrines of the church, such as Trinity, which I may come back to later, or incarnation, were devised precisely to tell Christians that they couldn't think about God as a simple personality, and that the revelation of God in Jesus Christ, the man, meant, says St. Thomas Aquinas, that we don't know even Jesus, never mind God. Thomas Aquinas was thinking of the verse in the Acts of the Apostles when Jesus ascends to heaven and it says that a cloud covered him. From now on, Jesus has gone from us in a way, says Thomas Aquinas, and we are left not knowing. There's a very famous 14th century English text called The Cloud of Unknowing, in which the master is teaching the novice a way of prayer. And he says to him, well, now you're going to ask me, he says to the novice, what is God? And I am going to tell you that I haven't the faintest idea. And that is, we find it difficult to accept unknowing in our world. If you say, do you believe in God, or do you believe it, or not? We like to have something definite. If someone asks us a question we don't know the answer, we'll say, I'll look it up. There's no question in our minds that there is an answer. Before the modern era, they were a little more humble. And there's no question of revelation sealing things off and stopping people thinking. The person who invented this Jewish midrash, the great Rabbi Akiva, who died in the earliest years of the 2nd century, he developed this inventive form of midrash. And there was a story about him in the Talmud. It said that the fame of his profound learning and brilliance reached heaven, and Moses heard about it. And he was intrigued, so he thought he'd come down and find out what was going on. So he came down from heaven and joined Rabbi Akiva's Torah class, sitting in the 8th row behind all the other students, and found to his intense embarrassment that he couldn't understand a word of the revelation that had been revealed to him on Mount Sinai. And he goes back to heaven shaking his head, saying, why, God, did you choose me to be the bearer of revelation when I don't have a moment, a minuscule part of that intellect? another rabbi put this more succinctly. He said, that which was not revealed to Moses was revealed to Rabbi Akiva and his generation. So revelation is continuous. It's not sealed off once and for all. And there's no question of anybody telling you what not to think. There's a wonderful story in the Talmud which I think should be inscribed over every seminary and over the doors of every department of religious studies. One day, the great Rabbi Eliezer was having an argument in the House of Studies with two of his colleagues about an abstruse point of law in the scripture. And he couldn't bring them round to his way of thinking. So he asked God, would God mind performing some miracles in order to prove that he was right? And sure enough, a canal started flowing uphill against the laws of nature. A carob tree moved 200 or 300 yards of its own accord to the left, and the walls of the House of Studies caved in as if they were about to collapse. The other rabbis were just not impressed. In fact, Rabbi Joshua was rather disapproving of these divine pyrotechnics. He spoke severely to the walls and said, it is not proper to collapse when the sages are inside discussing serious matters. Finally, in desperation, Rabbi Eliezer asked for a voice from heaven to adjudicate. And obligingly, a voice boomed down, why are you quarreling with Rabbi Eliezer? The halakha, the law, is exactly as he says. And Rabbi Joshua says, no. And he then quotes back to God his own scripture. Out of context and meaning something quite different, it is not in heaven, from Deuteronomy. And the gloss tells us that on Mount Sinai, the law came down from heaven to earth. It is not the business of heaven anymore, and therefore we do take no notice of a heavenly voice. Not even God can tell a Jew what to think. And this is admirable. I mean, we may laugh, but we have lost that confidence. And we cling in a servile way to things that we've been told or to literal interpretations of Scripture instead of launching out into the unknown. Now, one of the things that we found very difficult and has made religion very difficult for us is that we no longer understand the distinction between mythos, myth, and logos, reason. In the ancient world, in the pre-modern world indeed, in most cultures, it was well established that there were two ways of knowing things. One was mythos, one was logos. Now, logos we're all very familiar with. Logos is what we use when we're doing science or mathematics or medicine, and when we're trying to organize our societies or plan a battle. We need logos to our thoughts to respond absolutely accurately to events in the and facts of the outside world. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. But mythos is quite different. Myth, in modern parlance, often has become so debased in the modern period that it's just thought to be something that isn't true. If a politician is accused of a peccadillo in his past life, he is liable to say, oh, well, it's a myth. It didn't happen. But that's not how people understood myth in the ancient world. Mythos, described or tried to articulate all those elements in life for which there were no easy answers. Those puzzling, disturbing things that we cannot pin down, things that cause us grief. We need both of them. If your child dies, or you witness a terrible natural disaster, yes, certainly you want logos. You want to find out what exactly happened and why it happened. But you also perhaps want to sit quietly, perhaps to watch a sunset, perhaps to listen to some music, to sit quietly holding the hand of a friend in silence, dealing with the turbulence and grief and rage that you are experiencing. And this was the task of myth. Myth has been very aptly described as an early form of psychology. All those stories in the ancient myths about gods or heroes going down into the underworld, threading their way through labyrinths, fighting demons, were not describing historical events. What they were doing was explaining how we negotiated the complex labyrinthine world of our own psyche. And it's noticeable that when Freud and Jung charted the modern scientific search for the soul, how easily they turned to the old myths, finding them very germane. Think of the myth of Oedipus, the myth of Narcissus. So myth has been well described as something that in some sense happened once, but which also happens all the time. And many of our biblical stories and religious doctrines are myths in this sense. That doesn't mean they're less than truth, they're more than history. They're telling you what these things could have meant and how they mean something in a timeless way. Thus, the story, for example, of the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, sometimes called the Red Sea, in the book of Exodus. The Israelites are escaping, the waters open, they go through, Pharaoh and his army come after them, and they're all drowned. Now, this has been, people have been in our literalistic modern world, people have said, well, this is an account of flash flooding, which is very common in the region. And it's noble, but this is missing the point, because this story, whatever happened, we have no idea, is described precisely as a myth. The ancient Middle East was filled with the story of gods splitting seas in half to create the world. You have it in the Babylonian great creation myth. It was part of the common mythology. But this time, what is being split in two is a sea, but what is coming out of it is not a cosmos, not a world, not a universe, but a people. A people is being born. And similarly, in most cultures, the idea of immersion and going through water, we have it in baptism, is a great symbol of transformation and inner transformation. So something more important is being said than some freak of nature. And furthermore, why is this myth important? Because every year in ritual, it's brought alive at Passover with the Jewish Seder. And the Seder tells you that every Jew must consider that he is a member of that generation that escaped from Egypt. It's timeless. It's brought into the life and heart of every Jew, and it becomes a living reality. And this is religion. This is what religion is trying to do. Now, the most important thing about myth, however, is that myth is essentially a program for action. It's a program for action. The myth can place you in the right, correct spiritual posture, but it's up to you to take the next step. It's up to you to take part in a mindful way in that ritual. Just as it's up to you as a Christian to take part in the ritual of of the Eucharist and experience the presence of Christ within you. Myths were always either reenacted as symbolically as in the Seder or in the communion service, or literally reenacted in the ancient world in great dramatic festivals. And these dramas would bring the inner meaning, just like any great theatrical performance, would bring the inner meaning of this story right into the heart of the participants, those who took part. People who took part in the Eleusinian Mysteries in Athens were really rigorous ritual lasting several days, really taxing, frightening, came out of them often feeling that they no longer were afraid of death. These rituals have a profound effect. Also, later, one put them into practice in an ethical way. But the point is that unless you do perform these rituals, turn them into these myths, turn them into an action and bring them alive in your own life, they remain opaque. So our peculiar belief in the modern period, and it is peculiar, in the original sense of being one of a kind, one of its own, is that we first have to believe a whole lot of myths, and then we decide whether we're going to live a good religious life, would be regarded as pretty nonsensical by people such as the Buddha. First you do, then you get it. Now, in the modern period, we've turned knowledge into very much a sort of head trip. You believe things, there are these doctrines, and I'm coming to that, all that in a moment. But religious knowledge is actually a form of practical knowledge, like driving or swimming. You can't learn to swim by reading a book and sitting on the side of the pool. You have to get in, immerse yourself into the element and learn how to float. And once you've mastered that, you can't imagine why you ever found it difficult at all. You've just got a knack. But you have to do it. And no amount of explaining it or telling you how to manipulate your limbs can substitute for doing it. Similarly, driving. You can't learn to drive simply by reading the highway code or the car manual. You have to learn to get in and manipulate the brakes until it's second nature, and you can't really explain to anyone laboriously how you do it. A dancer or a gymnast has to practice for years, all day and every day, until they learn to move with an unearthly grace and perform feats that are absolutely impossible for an untrained body. Now, religious people have found through the centuries that certain rituals, ritualizing these myths which explain what is going on in the psyche, in your mind, in your heart, and lift you up to transcendence. They find, and also certain ethical practices. One of the kingpin of those is compassion. Is that if you practice these assiduously, you, like a dancer, acquire new capacities, but new capacities of heart and mind that are incomprehensible to an untrained person. Now, what happened? How did we get to this state that we've, as it were, put the cart before the horse? The word belief has become central to the religious experience, so much so that we actually call religious people believers, as though accepting certain doctrines in the creed were the most important thing that they ever did. But the word belief has changed its meaning. It means believer in Middle English, right up to the 17th century. It meant to trust, to commit yourself. Loyalty. Accept my believer, said Chaucer's knight to his lady. Accept my loyalty, my fealty. And so when they were translating the Bible into English, the King James and other translators and other translators found this Greek word in the New Testament, pistis. And that means to commit yourself, to trust. And so they translated it believer. Now, when St. Jerome was translating pistis into Latin, he used the word fides, which means faith, loyalty, commitment, but there wasn't a verbal form for pistis, for fides. So he used the word credo, now translated I believe, but originally it meant I give you, cordo, I give you my heart, I give my heart to this. So when Jesus is asking for belief or faith, we assume that he's asking that we believe that he's the second person of the Trinity, an idea he'd have found rather strange. But in fact, Jesus is not asking for this at all. He's asking people to commit themselves. He is asking for people to live rough, to live, sleep rough with, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, to live like the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, trusting, having pistis in God their Father, to give all their possessions to the poor, and to work night and day for the coming of the kingdom when rich and poor will sit at the same table. And that regards commitment and hard work. And early in how this would work in ritual, we know that this very early baptismal ceremonies were very elaborate affairs and for adults only. I mean, the ancients thought that religion was a serious matter and not really for children. So the new Christians would wait outside the church. At midnight, they'd been preparing for this all during Lent. On Easter Sunday, they would be baptized. And all the 6 weeks, they'd been intensively preparing for this moment, and a very dramatic ritual. And they would go into the church, they would be stripped of their clothes, and they would then be immersed in the baptismal pool. It's going through their own Red Sea, their own immersion. And they're thinking very much of the people of Israel going through that purification, that moment of creation. This is a new creation too. They've cast off their old selves. And they are plunged down underneath the pool. And the officiant will say, "Do you have pistis?" or fides in God the Father. And they would come up spluttering, crying, "Pisteo, I commit myself." In the Son, pisteo, credo. Now, these people were not sitting on the edge of the pool saying, well, having weighed all the evidence, I can now affirm that there is a God and that I'm ready to go. Not at all. This was an act of absolute commitment at a time when it could be very dangerous to be a Christian. And the rituals changed them, and it was only after that they were introduced to some of the more difficult articles of faith, such as Trinity. Now, what happened in the early modern period was that the word belief started to change its meaning to mean an intellectual assent to a somewhat dubious proposition. And we first find it used by Newton. One of the first usages, he said when he devised his solar system that he had it in mind that it might work with considering men for belief in a deity. Newton believed, and really believed, that he had found in this intricate solar system an absolute proof for God's existence, because it was so intricate that it must have had an intelligent mind to start the whole thing off. God was absolutely central to Newton's physics. And he said, it's now clear, we can now prove what it says in the Bible, that there really is an all-intelligent being that is wise and good. It must be good because it's preserving us all. And, he said, clearly very well versed in mechanics and geometry. Now, what you're doing here, I mean, this kind of thing would have absolutely made people like Thomas Aquinas turn in his grave. Or the great early Greek fathers of the Greek church said the world, physical world, can tell us nothing about God. Nothing about God, because God is being itself and can have nothing in common with the world, which is created from nothing, whose essential being is nothingness. Newton's theory was soon disproved. And within 2 or 3 generations, scientists such as Laplace were saying that actually you don't need that hypothesis. You can imagine this coming about of its own accord. Now, none of this would have mattered much if the churches, as well as the Enlightenment philosophers, hadn't taken up Newton's God and felt that they really could prove God's existence. I haven't time to go into Thomas Aquinas' proofs for the existence of God. They're not proofs. They're a form of the Brahmodya competition. At the end of them, he says, we don't know what it is we've proved. All we've proved is the existence of a mystery. It's pushing you into a state of transcendence. But we got so hooked on this, what we call natural theology, that we lost the old habits of mind and heart, what I call the apophatic, the silent, which when you're reduced to silence. And so when Darwin came along, we were left without recourse and people were floundering. And as globalization has spread, this kind of thinking has spread to other parts of the world. And so you get Muslims and even Jews and Buddhists even beginning to think in these sort of literalistic terms about their faith. Now, so religion is a form of practical action. And what is it most that what they all ask us to do is compassion. This is the meaning of the doctrine of Trinity, for example. Trinity was revealed to those catechumens after their baptism, after they'd been introduced, after they'd had this extraordinary experience of ritual. But Trinity wasn't just, they didn't just say, I've got news for you, God is one and God is three. It was a meditation. It was a meditation which, rather like the Buddhist mandala, where you thought of the absolutely unknowable essence of God, and then you swung your mind back to the 3 manifestations of God to the world, and then back to the unknowable again, to remind you that you couldn't think about God as a simple personality. But if you don't do the meditation, you don't get it. Any more than, you know, those mathematical problems we learnt at school, where you go through a whole line of reasoning, and at the end you come out, so A equals bx squared, a formula which is nonsense, because if you haven't gone through the reasoning before. One of the reasons why we've always found Trinity difficult in the West is that we didn't do the meditation. And Trinity is all about letting go of the self. The Trinity, as it's depicted often in a Russian iconography, shows the three angels that appeared to Abraham. And if you look at them, there's a very famous one by Andrei Rublev, and each one represents one of the Trinity. And they're sitting around a table, and you're sitting opposite them, and your eye is drawn to the central figure which represents the Word, the second person. But he doesn't look at you. He's looking to the left at the one representing the Spirit, who also doesn't return his gaze, but looks over to the one on the far right, which is the Father, circling round. But this isn't a God that is taking you on head on. Each empties itself and passes on to the other. Because what that myth is telling us is that holding on to ourselves and our egos and our selfishness and demand and at all costs is what holds us back from the divine. And the safest way to get rid of ego is through compassion, where you dethrone yourself from the center of your world and put another there. And that is why every single one of the major world religions has put compassion right at the heart of its teaching and says that this is the test of true faith. My favorite golden rule story probably refers to the great Pharisee Hillel, who was once approached by a pagan who promised to convert to Judaism on condition that the rabbi could recite the whole of Jewish teaching while he stood on one leg. And Hillel replied simply, "That which is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. That is Torah, and everything else is only commentary. Go and study it. Everything else is only commentary. No mention of the unity of God, the creation of the world, the exodus from Egypt. That's a commentary on the golden rule, never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself." Confucius, the first person that I know to formulate the golden rule, said that it was a central thread that ran through all his teaching and that pulled it all together. And he said to his disciples, you must practice it all day and every day. Not just when you feel like it, not when you are, you know, how we, well, perhaps you don't do this in Canada, but we have a habit in the UK of when we've done something nice for someone of saying, well, that's my good deed for the day. As though we can now return to the next 23 hours to our usual bitterness, greed, and selfishness. No, all day and every day. To do what the golden rule says, you look into your own heart, discover what gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. All day and every day. It means all day and every day you're stepping outside the ego and putting yourself in the place of another. And that, says the Confucian scripture Analects, is what brings you into transcendence. Because the Greeks had a word for this. They called it ecstasis, which means stepping outside. You're standing outside the self. And it is that brings us into relation to transcendence, when we lay aside the greedy, grasping ego. I think it's important to note that, and here I come full circle to when I was saying that before, in the pre-modern period, all ideology was in some way religious. Religion permeated everything. And so these great thinkers and sages, and I'm talking about the Buddha, Confucius, Jesus, the rabbis, the prophets, the sages of the Upanishads, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They were all working in societies like our own, where violence had reached an unprecedented crescendo. And they were looking into an abyss. Of course, that violence was minuscule compared with what we face today. But they were convinced that if we went on behaving in this inimical way to each other, we would destroy ourselves. And they all insisted you couldn't confine your benevolence to your own group. You had to give it even to your enemies. Nothing to do with feeling love for your enemies, but putting making sure that you were out for his good, looking out for his well-being, that you would be loyal to him and come to his aid. And this is the sort of love that we must give to our enemies. And they were not, but they were quite political in their thinking. In China, the Confucians would become major advisors to the emperor. And what they were trying to do was counterbalance the emperor and his armies and warfare with all the apparatus of the state with this ethic of compassion. They're offering an alternative. The Buddha did the same at a time when India was reaching a sort of height of aggression and commercial, a new commercial life was dawning and greed was taking over. He was offering another way of being human, based on compassion and kindness and respect. One of the kings came to visit him one day and looked at the way the monks were looking at each other. He said, with eyes as gentle as wild deer. And this is another way to be human. And Jesus, you see Jesus in the Gospels standing before the Roman governor. Talking about another kind of kingdom. Another kind of way for human beings to live together rather than one based on power. And Christ crucified becomes an emblem of all the horror, the cruelty, the violence that men inflict upon other men and women too. The ecce homo is that famous, often painted depiction of Jesus with the crown of thorns and suffering. That is the human being, suffering at the hands of other human beings. And similarly, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was operating at a time in Mecca and Arabia when violence had reached an unprecedented crescendo. And the Quran is a call for compassion. A call not for sort of touchy-feely compassion, but that you look after the poor. You devote your life to creating a just and decent society where all people, even the most vulnerable, are treated with respect. This is what we are called to do. It is a struggle, it's an effort. But in doing this, we leave the grasping, greedy, insecure, frightened ego behind. And we encounter a transcendence that we call God, or Brahman, or Tao, or Nirvana. And it's a long road, but it is, I think, lies at the heart of a great deal of some of the best of the religious aspirations in all of the world traditions. Thank you.
We're going to give Karen a couple of minutes to rest before her next address, which will begin very shortly. I have to say I love that story from my own tradition about the walls that start to collapse. My favorite part of it is the rabbi who stops the walls from collapsing, and it says that the walls stopped from collapsing out of respect for that rabbi who stood up and rebuked them. But they didn't straighten up out of respect for the rabbi who invoked the walls on his side, and they're leaning to this very day. The tension in that room represents, I think, the alive mind that is at the heart as well as the spirit of our teacher, Karen Armstrong, who has given us this great gift this evening, and I certainly appreciated that address, I know, as much as the rest of you. I'm not going to do what a lot of people do after having heard a wonderful address, which is to recapitulate the address and then pitch it in a different direction. I'm not going to do that. But I do want to remark on the power of the story that is a thread running through her work. And I thought it would be appropriate to just very briefly tell you a little bit about the story behind this evening and the 12 Days of Compassion. The architect of all of this is my cherished colleague and mentor, Mark Winston, the academic director of the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University, for whom I'm standing in this evening. And the Blaney Award, which is a really prestigious achievement, recognition of a particularly significant body of work contributing to society, is really a great honor. What's especially distinctive about the way in which the Blaney Award program has been carefully constructed by the Center for Dialogue, as I've observed it, is the way in which it engages the community. Many, many, many hours of meetings, conversations, of visioning by members of the steering committee, by the staff at the Center for Dialogue, and of course many people within the university at large, reached out to the wider community and created this incredible array of events during these 12 days. Just imagine the opportunity for mayors and city councilors and city managers to meet behind closed doors with Karen Armstrong and engage in a free-ranging conversation without media present about what it might mean to make our cities more compassionate. What an incredible opportunity that is. Imagine an evening for parents and teenagers at a couple of the public schools to engage in an intergenerational discussion about compassion. How rare an opportunity it is for over 100 academics to gather in a special conference organized by the Faculty of Education to look at how curricula could teach compassion more effectively in schools. Or the opportunity for leaders of the business community to gather at the Board of Trade, have lunch, and to be pushed to think about ways in which commerce could be made more compassionate, what that might mean for their organizations and for the wider society in which they play such an important role. Next week, a student conference, which SFU very generously offered to be located on the UBC campus. I mean, that's really something. There is a kind of playfulness to my remark, but the fact is that these universities really do cooperate in many more ways than one knows. The undergraduate semester in dialogue right now, this semester, is a semester in the city, a kind of urban policy laboratory open to students from 6 local universities. And next week, a little bit of the story that you wouldn't otherwise know if you're not registered as a student to attend that conference. Not only will Karen Armstrong be speaking, but 8 storytellers from 8 different traditions will be sharing a 5-minute story each about compassion in their tradition. And the keynote by Karen Armstrong will actually be preceded, as is appropriate in this land, given our history and our memory and our appreciation of First Nations cultures and of their experience. Her keynote address will be preceded by a welcome, a compassionate welcome, offered by the past president of the Nisga'a Nation, Chief Joseph Gosnell. We are here now, as many of you are aware, on the unceded traditional Coast Salish people's territories. It's important for us to say it, but it's also important for us to live it. And I know that I'm not the only person here who appreciates the opportunity to reflect on the significance of those, not just those words, but of the ways in which we live our lives as an expression of what it means to be a Canadian, not only on the basis of the great non-Indigenous religious traditions that arrived on this continent, but also learning from the elders, the teachers of the Indigenous cultures, whose religion and religions, really, are also a part of the human heritage about compassion. I think we've given Karen an opportunity to rest. And now she is, in a few minutes, going to be answering responding to pre-submitted questions. But I'm now delighted to introduce her for her State of the Charter for Compassion address. This is a celebration of the tremendous progress that the Charter has made and a vision for the road ahead as we continue to assert compassion as the cornerstone of a just economy and a peaceful world. Please join me in welcoming back Karen Armstrong.
Well, thank you again, Vancouver. And thank you again, SFU and Professor Mark Winston, and for the great honour of the Jack Blaney Award. And thank you for the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network. It's not easy to say, but we are so glad you've partnered with us. And I know you're going to do a tremendous job of leading Vancouver to join us and perhaps become a compassionate city. And now, the state of the Charter. Well, our world, in many ways, is broken. Every night on our television news, we're deluged with images of suffering and pain and grief and misery in a way that perhaps no previous generation has been, and we wonder what we can do about this. And how can a Charter for Compassion help this? Indeed, what is compassion? Because the word has so dropped out of our lexicon that people often simply think it means feeling sorry for people, pity. But of course, compassion means more than that. Compassion means to endure something with another person. It comes from the Greek and Latin word kompathein, to feel with the other, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it's been epitomized in the Golden Rule, which has been developed in every single one of the major world religions. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. And the reason that they developed all this ethic quite independently was that it reflected something deep in the structure of our humanity. We understand compassion, we respond to it, because it is inscribed deeply in our nature and even in the physical makeup of our mind. And the great sages insisted, all of them, that you could not confine your benevolence to your own group. You must have yan ai, concern for everybody, even your enemy. And now it seems clear to me that unless we learn to implement the Golden Rule globally, so that we treat all peoples, whoever they may be, as we would wish to be treated ourselves, we are not going to have a viable world. We're so deeply interconnected with one another. These images of pain are not confined to a distant part of the globe. We've created a global society where we affect one another all the time. Economically, when markets plummet in one part of the world, stocks go down all day long around the world. What happens in Afghanistan today can have repercussions in New York or London tomorrow. We've seen that in our 21st century. And we're linked together as never before on the World Wide Web. We are one people. These scenes of suffering we see are not something sealed off in unfortunate regions. They will rebound upon us because we cannot live without one another. And the only way in which we are going to achieve a peaceful world is if we learn to treat others as we would wish to be treated ourselves. Had we done that in the past, we would not be experiencing so many difficulties, problems today, because there's been a build-up of frustration, sorrow, pain, and distress that is sometimes exploding in the terrorist activities and the wars that threaten and damage us all. So, how did the Charter come about? Well, when I heard that I'd won the TED Prize, I knew that the TED Prize gives you a wish for a better world. And I knew almost immediately what it was I wanted, because as a historian of religion, it's long been a frustration to me that the religions, which have all got this ethic of a concern for everybody and the golden rule, and say that it's the heart of faith, the test of true spirituality, should be making a major contribution to one of the chief tasks of our time. And what is that task? It is surely to build a global community where people of all persuasions can live together in respect. If we don't achieve this, we are not going to have a peaceful, viable, sustainable world. And yet, it seemed to me you never heard religious leaders talking about this much. They tended to talk about doctrines, etc., or a certain sexual ethic. So I asked Ted to help me create, craft, and propagate a charter for compassion, which would recall religion and morality and ethics back to the central principle of the golden rule and compassion. And the charter was written by leading thinkers and activists representing 6 of the major world religions. It was, as it were, a demonstration that despite our manifold differences, and perhaps even the tensions between us, on this we were all in agreement, and we could work together, reaching across the divide for a better world. And finally, in 2009, November 2009, the Charter was unveiled, revealed, and celebrated in 60 major locations all around the world. Well, then what happened? Well, we seem to have touched a nerve because many people endorsed the Charter. Nearly 85,000 people have affirmed the Charter to date, and some of them have, online, have made quite strong commitments. They really do understand now what compassion is, that it's not pity or feeling sorry for people, it's looking into your own heart, discovering what gives you pain, and then refusing to inflict that pain on anybody else at all. And we also have 150 partners worldwide, all of whom were engaged in compassionate activities, but now we're working together. And this theme of working together is one of the themes that we've been trying to develop in these last 2 years. Because we need to form a new network. We need to create a new movement, a united movement. But wonderful as these affirmations are, it's not enough. Somehow, we have to translate the Charter, which is primarily a call to action, into practical, sustainable, creative, and realistic action, so that we make compassion a dynamic and positive force in our tragically and dangerously polarized world. We need to change the way we speak about one another, for example. We often, in our Western society, our discourse is so often aggressive. It's not enough for us to seek the truth. We also have to defeat or humiliate our opponents, whether that's in the media or the academia or politics. And we speak so omnisciently about other people. Oh, well, the trouble with her is, we say, as though we could simply sum up the mystery that every single human being represents in a single sentence. And we do it for whole cultures. Well, the trouble with Islam is, we say, omnipotently, often relying on a half-remembered op-ed piece here or a television interview there. And this, of course, is dangerous, a gift to the extremists, and it also damages us because it is against everything that our liberal societies stand for. We need also to acquire a sensitivity to the pain of the world. When we see these images of pain and suffering, we have not to push it away, as we often try and do, but to let them break our hearts. Let us see this not as an intrusion, but not as where we feel compassion fatigue, but as an opportunity for growth, a growth of sympathy, letting down that carapace of heartlessness which we often construct around ourselves to keep pain safely at bay. We need to develop a global awareness so that we are not just stuck in our own cultures and looking out as though this is the acme of human experience and other societies are lesser or less important, but to develop a global sympathy for people all around the world with whom we're so deeply connected. And now you may feel, well, compassion isn't for me. I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not a saint. I have something to tell you. As saints are fiction. Saints don't exist. We are all deeply flawed beings. We, all of us, have weaknesses, fears, anxieties, meannesses that we don't want anybody to know about. But even the great Gandhi, Martin Luther King, they were flawed human beings, and yet look what they achieved. It shows you the power of what one person dedicated to compassion can do. And imagine if all of us who believed in the golden rule got active, what we could do if we were really, really committed. So compassion isn't an option. It's the key to our survival. So what are we doing about it? Well, first off, we've just launched a brand new website. And I'm absolutely thrilled with it. I think it can provide a meeting place for people all over the world who are struggling to create this united movement, to find out what's going on in different parts of the world this week, hearing new stories, hearing about new developments that are happening, as you're going to hear, all around our planet at the moment. One of the great projects is our Cities campaign. Seattle led the way here. Seattle was the great pioneer. In 2010, they declared Seattle a compassionate city and invited other cities to join them. And at the moment, there are over 70 cities worldwide waiting to go through this process. Well, what does it mean to become a compassionate city? It certainly doesn't mean that you are compassionate already. It means that you're putting compassion on your radar screen. You're going to try to integrate the compassionate ethic, the golden rule ethic, into the gritty reality of city life in the 21st century. Because this is the heart of the city, is the heart of our civilization. I have every year in Seattle, they undertake a practical task on which the city works together that needs to be done, perhaps an environmental issue or a business problem. And the object of that is to raise awareness of compassion and bring it from the lumber room of our minds back to the forefront of consciousness. I have dreams, when we're further down the road here, of twinning compassionate cities, so that you can have a city in the Middle East twinned with a city in Canada or the United States. And people, the universities and schools in those cities can communicate, we can exchange news, and gradually some of those misapprehensions we have about one another can be broken down. Recently, Louisville, right in the middle of Middle America, declared itself a compassionate city with enormous enthusiasm. The mayor of Louisville is determined to set a world record in compassionate acts. Now, in Canada, New London has declared itself a compassionate city, and Canada's been a leading enthusiast for the book clubs, which are studying my book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, and trying to integrate this into their daily practice. 61 reading groups in Vancouver alone. Pakistan, perhaps one of the jewels in the crown of the Charter. In this country, which is on the on the front line of so many of the conflicts that are tearing our world apart so dangerously, I cannot describe the enthusiasm and commitment for the Charter in that country. They're concentrating principally on education. And just one of the many inventive and extraordinary things they've done is that they've introduced a compassionate character into Sesame Street. And when I was there, I met the company, the puppet company, who are making the puppet. And I said, I want this guy to be really cool. I don't want him to be some simp handing out flowers and uttering sweet platitudes. I want him to be clever and funny, and sometimes to make mistakes. Now, I don't think you're seeing him up there because he's having some costume changes. But the last time I saw him, he was looking great. The idea is that preschool children will become accustomed to that character. He'll be a role model for them, and we can use that character in our primary school compassionate curriculum. Now, Pakistan is working closely hand in glove with Jordan on the other side of the Gulf. They too are intensely interested in education. During Ramadan, Jordan and Pakistan together had a competition on the web where they invited people to post up a compassionate action every day during Ramadan. And there would be prizes for the most imaginative acts, but compassionate prizes, not a mobile phone or an iPad, but a cataract operation for somebody who might need one, for example. Now, we didn't think that there'd be more than 10,000 takers, but 40,000 people took part all through Ramadan. Again, the idea is not just the competition, but to make people aware of compassion, to rescue compassion from the junk room of our minds and put it back right in the center of our consciousness. Next year, we are quite convinced we'll be in this competition, people in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon will take part too. Holland, another trouble spot which has great problems with its Muslim population. What is wonderful when you go to Amsterdam, who's been involved in the Charter almost from day one, you see Muslim and Dutch young people working together to create a more compassionate society. And they have done a wonderful thing. Some Dutch people have translated the Charter into a charter for medical ethics. The young Dutch citizen doctor who came to see me about this said, we doctors, we go into medicine because we want to help people. And somehow in the course of our training, that gets knocked out of us. Let's put it right back in. Now, one of my personal favorite projects is the prison reform campaign by Ari Cohen, who's in the front row there, in Seattle. Ari has devised a program for training prison officers and treating prisoners in a more respectful manner. When it was put into practice in a very problematic Washington jail, the idea was that the goal was to decrease violence in that jail by 2.5%. In fact, the project, it was so successful that violence was decreased by 100%. It worked. And now they're working out in the wonderful practical way they have in Seattle what it would save the federal government to implement this throughout jails in the United States. Schools are a big part of the compassionate outreach, especially in Pakistan, Holland, and Canada. The charter's been adapted for small children. Curricula are being introduced at various levels. One of the networks of compassionate schools are being created in which the staff who are teaching compassion also have to go for training days. We don't want to give them the idea that compassion is just for kids. And we're hoping when we get a bit further down the line that we'll be able to link up some of these schools so that pupils electronically can reach out in a compassion class in Pakistan, can reach out with children in Holland. Again, drawing the world together. And of course, we've got our reading groups. Over 500 worldwide now studying 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, but also in Pakistan, my letter to Pakistan, which in a wild moment I agreed, in a foolish moment, to write, especially for my visit to Pakistan, when I visited for the launch of the Charter. And the book, when it was first published, was sold out in 2 days. But you can read all about this in far more detail on the website, and find out about ongoing activities. So we are beginning to work for a better world. Now, one of the first people I approached about the Charter, long before I even made my acceptance speech at TED, was my dear friend and mentor, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And he knew, of all people, how demanding compassion could be, but also how necessary. Because without compassion, we can behave like criminals to one another, as he had experienced for so long in his life and in his struggle. And he knew that compassion is demanding and requires effort. So, we've achieved perhaps a lot, but there's still so much to do, and we need your help. So, what you can do is go on the site today, have a look around the website, explore it, read the Charter, and find out whether you agree with it or not, and if so, affirm it. Join the compassion community, and connect with your local compassion network. And perhaps if you haven't got one locally, you could create one. There'll be information on the website to tell you how to go about this. Because ultimately, the choice is ours. We can either emphasize in our various traditions, be they religious or secular, those aspects of the tradition that are exclusive, cruel, dismissive of others, intolerant. Or we can look in our traditions, religious or secular, for those that speak of compassion, empathy, respect. But we know what will happen if we don't choose the latter. Compassion is not an option. It's a key to our survival. We cannot reasonably expect either our governments or our enemies to behave more tolerantly, compassionately, and respectfully if we ourselves, in our own personal lives, give way to unexamined prejudice. We can turn things around. People often say to me, oh, well, you're just preaching to the converted. And who doesn't believe in the golden rule? No one could disagree with it. I don't care whether anyone agrees or not. It's not interested. What we need to do is to act upon it. And if we all became active upholders of the golden rule in our daily lives, in our political lives, in our cities, we could counter the voices of extremism and hatred that are tearing our world apart and endangering us all. And we could create a better, more just and respectful world. We can do it, and we must do it for the sake of ourselves and the next generations that follow us. Thank you. Thank you for your support for the Charter in all that you do, and thank you in advance for all the work that I know you're going to be doing for the Charter in the future. Thank you.
We're going to conclude in just under 15 minutes. So before we do that, we're going to pose a few questions that have come in advance. The first one is from Nancy Moran here in Vancouver, and she says, you've described yourself as being Hanif and also as a freelance monotheist. These self-descriptions are intriguing. Could you please expand on this a little?
Well, I once said to somebody in a light-hearted, frivolous moment, I'm a freelance monotheist, and this thing has dragged me. It's like a tin can, attached to my heel. What I was trying to say was that for a long time, I went away from religion and wanted nothing to do with it ever again. But it was my study of other faiths, or initially of Judaism and Islam and Greek and Russian Orthodox Christianity, that made me see other things that I had not experienced in my own Catholic upbringing, but which also made me see my own original faith differently. And I draw nourishment from all these faiths. I can't see any one of them as superior to any of the others. I think each has its own genius, each its particular flaws and failings. But monotheist is really out of date, because since then I've been exploring religions that aren't strictly monotheistic or even theistic, such as Buddhism or the Chinese traditions, which have absolutely enthralled me, and which also bear a family resemblance. So that was the freelance monotheist ones. Hanif is something that I sometimes say to Muslims who ask me why I don't convert to Islam. I say, well, I'm probably a Hanif, one who is searching for God. A Hanif was somebody who, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, who were inching their way towards a more advanced form of religion before the revelation arrived.
Dale Roberts in Asheville, North Carolina, in the United States, asks, secondary schools and colleges seem to focus on academic study. The humanities are seen as abstract intellectual constructs rather than as practical tools for living, for fulfilling our humanity. How can we bring education for compassion into our schools?
Well, it's what we're trying to do. I think the humanities are hugely important for compassion. I think the arts are very important for compassion. Because what is art but an exercise of imagination, where you gain a sort of sense of transcendence? And what is compassion but imagination, where you put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and try and see something from a point of view other than your own? Reading a novel, for example, helps you to inhabit the minds and lives of other people. And my original subject, in fact, was English literature at university. And I learnt a tremendous amount. I still draw immensely on literature, as much as from religion in many ways, for those insights about our humanity, about the tragedy of our existence, about the dilemmas that we face. And I think if you look at the Greek tragedies, for example, with the Greeks in the 5th century BCE, who introduced the genre of tragic drama, they put suffering on stage. And the whole of Athens, once a year on the Feast of Dionysus, it was also a religious festival, they watched a man or a woman undergoing extreme agony. And the leader of the chorus would cry out to the audience, "Now weep. Weep for Oedipus, a man who'd broken every taboo in the book, for someone in real life whom you'd shun." And the Greeks did weep. They didn't believe that it was sissy to weep. They wept aloud because they believed weeping together created a bond between men and it cemented citizenship. And the first of those plays to come down to us was Aeschylus's The Persians. And it was presented just a few years after the Battle of Salamis, when the Greeks, the Athenians, had defeated the Persian army. But before that victory, the Persians had trashed Athens and looted, vandalized, and destroyed all the beautiful new temples on the Acropolis outside the city. And now Aeschylus asks them to weep for the Persians. So I think that we shouldn't see compassion as something hived off into a special subject of its own. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is introduce modules of compassion. But once you start waking up to it, you start seeing compassion in something like the study of Greek tragedy or Shakespeare. I don't know whether people actually read Shakespeare these days, but if they don't, they're missing a lot. In poetry, in novels, in art, where you see a painter looking at something differently that makes us see it quite differently. If you think of Van Gogh's chair, for example, or the peasant boots, which are numinous, so that even the most unpromising thing can give us unexpected depths, just as each person we encounter, too, we can see anew and see marvelous things in. So I think to introduce that compassionate ethos into the study of literature or history, where we learn to see, not just flogging on with our own histories, but looking at perhaps how we've interacted with other peoples in the past, like your first people here, your First Nation. And we British, we have to learn about colonialism and what we did. Many of our problems today spring from those problems that we inflicted on people in our colonies. And learning in the religion, learning about the riches of other people's faiths as well as your own. It doesn't mean you have to abandon your own faith, far from it, but that you reach out generously to others and see insights and the depth of the human search for the transcendent and the compassionate. So I think if you... I don't mind things being academic. I'm a bit academic myself. And I have to say that it's my study that has helped me to be compassionate, helped me to teach myself about compassion, and to extend my range. And I think you should study things rigorously, but that you should study it also with heart. And once you get that compassionate idea in your head, you start seeing it in the humanities everywhere.
Chelsea Williamson in Murray State, Kentucky, asks about children. What are some suggestions for families attempting to raise compassionate children in a society not built for encouraging compassion in our youngest generations?
What
What are some suggestions for families attempting to raise compassionate children in a society that doesn't seem to be built to encourage compassion in our youngest generations?
Well, I think the family is crucial. And that was the great insight of the Confucians, that compassion is, the family is the school of compassion. Because here you are living with people on a daily basis. Marriage, for example, requires constant compassion. I've never married, and I marvel at how people do it. I mean, every day, I should imagine, you have to forgive somebody something and accommodate their needs. And children, I mean, and here quite seriously, in the Hebrew tradition, the word for compassion is related etymologically to the word for womb, as it is in Arabic, which mother love, and mother love is hard, because the mother has to get up every night to her crying child. However exhausted she is, she has to put her own needs on the back burner and be aware of that child every second of the day. And then that cute baby grows up and can become a dreadful disappointment. But the mother never gives up. And there's a Buddhist prayer attributed to the Buddha himself, which says, "Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child." We have to have that same responsibility for all our fellow beings and all our fellow humans, even when they disappoint us. So I think the family is a school of compassion. It's where we learn compassion. I think we mustn't be too grim about the world outside, because people do recognize compassion when they see it. Look how they flock in droves to see the Dalai Lama, literally in thousands, or Desmond Tutu. And look at the respect and love the whole world, not just the people of South Africa, feel for Nelson Mandela. That people recognize it. And I think we need to hold up these models to children, and look around your own community for people who are unsung compassionate heroes, but who deserve it. People in your own family, for example, in your own school. Teach your children how to look for what a certain person is suffering, and how bravely he or she is carrying on, perhaps under great odds, against illness perhaps or something. And teach them about other peoples. Teach them that our nation isn't always just the best, that other nations have insights, other nations suffer. And one of the things we have to realize is that our enemies also have pain. When Aeschylus pointed out that the Persians he presents as a people in mourning. He tries to see the Battle of Salamis from the Persians' point of view. And we must try and do that with our enemies when we see the suffering in the wars that we have been waging recently, inflicted on the ordinary people in the theatre of war. People who are suffering, oppression and injustice and poverty. Educate your children in that way. Help them to sympathize and empathize and put themselves in those people's shoes.
Well, I hope you can feel the affection and respect that filled this room, and that is an expression of the deep appreciation that all of us have for the work that you've been doing, the work that you have done for us this evening during these 12 days and in the many years to come.